My name's Katherine Ulrich. I'm in History 1378, and this is my History Section Assignment number 4. The Civil Rights Movement was a series of social movements in the United States aimed at ending racial segregation and discrimination. Some of the goals were to gain racial equality in every aspect of life, from jobs, voting rights, pay, and respect, to ending racial segregation and discrimination against African Americans in general. They aimed at securing legal recognition and getting federal protection from the government. In a letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King Jr. states that in any nonviolent campaign, there are 4 basic steps: collection of the facts to determine whether injustices are alive, negotiation, self-purification, and direct action. Direct action would include sit-ins, marches, peaceful protesting, civil disobedience, and boycotts. Negotiation would include communication between activists and government authorities to make progress on achieving rights for the civil rights movement. Over time, the civil rights movement has gained many successes, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which expressly bans discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in employment practices, and it also ends unequal application of voter registration requirements and racial segregation in schools, at the workplace, and by public accommodations. They were also successful in achieving the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which restores and protects voting rights for minorities. They also passed the Immigration and Nationality Services Act of 1965, which removes racial and national barriers and opens up a way for black immigrants from Africa and the Western Hemisphere. The Fair Housing Act of 1968 banned discrimination in sale or rental of housing. The Civil War amendments include the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. The 13th Amendment bans slavery in all involuntary servitude, except in case of punishment for a crime. The 14th Amendment defines a citizen as any person born or naturalized in the U.S. Blacks become eligible for citizenship because at first they were not seen as citizens. The 15th Amendment prohibits the government from denying U.S. citizens the right to vote based on race, color, or past servitude. Although the movement has achieved much success, there are still inequalities present in America to this day. Groups such as Black Lives Matter are still fighting to end racism. The hardest thing to do is fight for change when people refuse to be open-minded or change the mindset they have that has brought about so much pain and suffering. Everyone should be seen as equal. No individual has the right to treat others as beneath themselves. The feminism movement is a fight for equality similar to the civil rights movement, but their goals vary among nations and communities. The first wave of the feminism movement that appeared, known as First Wave Feminism, oriented around the station of upper or middle class white women who were fighting for suffrage and political equality. The second wave of feminism that occurred focused on further combating social and cultural inequalities faced by females in the United States. The third wave of feminism that appeared continued to address financial, social, and cultural inequalities, including renewed campaign for a greater influence of women in politics and media. Part of the second wave of feminism included redeveloping society through the feminist point of view, fighting for reproductive freedom and access to legal abortion, as well as desexing the English language, fighting for equal access to education, legislative equality, political participation, redeveloping household roles, and support for mothers with newborn children. Abortion rights also became a major focus during the feminism movement. Tactics used by the feminism movement include suffrage parades, conventions, books written by females in the feminism movement, demonstrations, picketing the White House, which is where women protested to pressure President Woodrow Wilson to support the feminism movement. It involved over 1,000 women, and the protest led to many arrests. More tactics include lawsuits for equality, and many women spoke out for reproductive freedom. Like the civil rights movement, the feminism movement gained many successes. One of the most famous lawsuits during the feminism movement was known as Roe v. Wade, which established that privacy under the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment extended to a woman's decision to have an abortion. This gained major ground for all the women who were fighting for abortion rights during the movement. Along with that, they gained the first women's studies department during the feminism movement. During the movement, they also established the Equal Rights Amendment, which guarantees equality under the law for women. Along with that came the Equal Pay Act, which was an amendment to the Fair Labor Standards Act that prohibits employers from paying unequal wages based on gender. Women also became part of the Civil Rights Act under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act allowed women to fight employment discrimination. Like the civil rights movement, I feel like women in the feminism movement still have struggles today with changing the mindset of certain men, especially when it comes to employment practices. We are often seen as unequal to men in the workplace. The LGBTQ movement, similar to the feminism movement and the civil rights movement, advocated for acceptance of LGBTQ citizens in society. Some of the cultural goals they focused on were challenging dominant perceptions of masculinity and femininity, as well as homophobia. Some of the political goals they focused on were gaining new rights, benefits, and protection from harm. They also focused on gaining LGBTQ marriage in states that, as of right now, deny them that right to marry. Some of the tactics used during this movement include political activism and cultural activity, which includes lobbying, street marches, social groups, media, art, and research that gained ground for the LGBTQ movement. The Stonewall riots were some of the most important riots in the LGBTQ movement. It was a series of spontaneous, violent demonstrations by the LGBTQ community against a police raid that took place at the Stonewall Inn. It set off a series of political activism in the LGBTQ movement by finally giving them a voice. The LGBTQ movement has more recently gained a lot of their successes. As of 2013, 8 states acknowledge or allow LGBT marriage. Rights granted to the LGBTQ movement as of 2013 include joint tax filing, military benefits, family and medical leave, and the ability to get a green card. The LGBTQ movement is one of the most recent movements, and I feel like they still have a long ways to go in the movement as far as successes. Okay. I'm done recording. Now I have to put it all together and submit it.